I don't know. I'm not encouraging anyone to cheat or whatever, but I think like in terms of preparation and stuff, I'm sure he can still help. I don't know if that's banned actually. I don't know. Don't cheat. No one cheat, guys. Okay. Fur joins 00 Nation. 00 Nation, Pim tells me, is started by some old FaZe guys who want to try to do FaZe again. And so they have a lot of money, and they're trying to rebuild up this brand, and they picked up Oplano, and now they've got Fur. And you better believe Fur was not cheap, okay? So that's the first sign that they've got a lot of money. They also have, you could see the social media announcement going crazy when Fur joined the squad. So I think they're making a good move. Fur is not a better player than Henny. Henny is really relevant, really insane, and in his peak. And was in his peak on Furia, but really wanted to play with Lucas. Now, there is the rumor that he might go back to Furia. And that would be amazing, because Furia with Henny were a sick team. I would pick them in a lot of matches. But Furia without Henny and Henny without Furia are both bad. So, not a fan of either of those things. So, you know what they say, anything can happen. Pasha, 6 for Team Liquid. If someone gets sick, I guess if someone gets sick, someone gets hurt, knock on wood. We don't want that to happen. But if it did, Fnafly sprained his finger, you know what I mean? If he sprained his finger, Pasha could be on the starting lineup for Team Liquid at the major. Wouldn't that be a sight for sore eyes? And if they make playoffs, he'll get a sticker. Not saying I want it. I don't. Keep those fingers safe, Fnafly. But Papito, you know what I'm saying? Extremum benched their roster. They didn't qualify for the major. They played basically no games this year. They didn't win the few games that they played. They're NV 2.0. Except the org was actually good. The org did a good job of trying to create content throughout the year. They took some sick-ass HLTV photos for the team. I hope Extremum find a new team that can deliver more results and enter more qualifiers and tournaments and stuff like that. But I think they burned the org pretty badly by not performing, not qualifying for the major, not playing a lot. And not a lot of sympathy there, honestly. They're nice guys. They seem like nice guys, but for what it's worth, I mean, I'm concerned about the whole health of the scene, and I feel like they did their org a disservice. And I know everyone's trying to win, but if they could have tried 10% harder and won some matches and entered more stuff, I'm going to assume they could have, and so I don't think they did a very good job. Device as the EU RMR MVP. This is just to say that Device is in murder form coming into the major. NIP as a whole have been winning more with Device, but now Device is also playing well. Where earlier on in the year he was not playing well, but the team was winning more. Now it's both. So now I think NIP are in some super upward trajectory and can potentially get to playoffs. I have them making playoffs at this event. CSGO fixes the water bug. It's only been 8 years. Great job, though. Water bug's fixed. Now we can play Ancient at the major. Competitive integrity intact. Integrity. The only 5 players to ever attend a major. Who are they? Olaf, Shocks, Device, Zip, and Dupree. They are playing in this major. The only 5. This could be Olaf's last major. It could be, I don't know, maybe Shocks' last major. The other guys, of course, it seems like they'll keep going for sure. You know, I don't know. I don't really see Shocks even, but Olaf maybe. You know, it really depends. Because this last year's been very fickle for him, but they qualified. I'm sure Olaf's going to have a great major. He's going to kill some players that are nervous where he's not. I guarantee it. But that's where we end. That's the news. A few days, no demo reviews. I hope you enjoyed these different kinds of content, trying to hype up the major, gives people some story.
Yo, is this Fabian?
Notification bell.
My god,
Ding.
is this Fabian?
Sub. Bang. And
Look at me.
be safe. As always, be safe.
I'm replying.
Yes.
Hello.
Like do it a quick impact, like a big punch or a hard strike. It just like repels it. But if you move at the right speed, it can go through.
Yeah. One of the coolest things.
It's pretty cool. They did well.
Yeah, they did excellent at implementing this in the movie. But like, I just love that.
So you're just wondering why a bomb going off can still hurt you?
Well, because so like the Harkonnen ships come in and they fire these projectiles down.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows the projectile Like
drilling
it's
through.
obviously designed to kind of like go fast and then hit the shield, and obviously it can't get through the shield if it's going fast, so then it slows down and keeps going slowly through the shield, and then it explodes.
Yeah, we have those weapons now, like bunker busters, like rockets that are meant to like go in through cement and then explode.
Yeah, but what I'm
Wow,
saying is
I didn't know that.
in the book, there's no projectile weapons basically used. Like there
Nikudar.
are energy weapons
Fabian.
where I think they mentioned like rifles
Gaming.
and stuff at some point, but like there are lasers or whatever in this universe, but no one uses the lasers to shoot at somebody, at a person, because in the book, a laser hitting a shield creates basically like a nuclear explosion.
They're called laser guns and they're illegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that we saw a laser gun in this movie when Duncan Idaho was flying the ornithopter away and he getting chased by that beam that's just cutting through everything.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that was a laser gun.
Right.
Oh, I see. That's why. Yeah, it's like the same thing that's like arc welding through the door,
I
and
didn't
it
even
shows
think
it
about
like
that.
destroy everything.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's cool. That was a really cool second of like film. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, because it just looks like a beam of light.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a laser, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with an explosion can still kill you if you have a shield. It's just the same way that when Duncan Idaho knees you in the face, it still knocks you down and hurts you. Like you,
Yeah.
even if you're not getting like cut open, just the impact of your body slamming on it.
And I love the visual of like the bomb explosion being trapped inside the shield. I thought it looked so
that
cool.
looks sick.
So sick.
I guess I just didn't understand why those ships have shields when these weapons exist that can just get through the shields, no problem.
It's
Well,
probably, yeah. It probably still protects you from
Like,
like,
maybe-
lots of stuff.
Well, why would you wear? That's like saying like why does a knight wear a suit of armor when like you could still stab him through the gaps between it?
Well, no, but this
It's like
isn't a
it
gap.
offers-
You just shoot the
it
you
offers
shoot
some
the shield
protection.
anywhere. You shoot the shield at any point, and this projectile gets through the shield.
Well, yeah, but maybe those
damage.
bombs are super specialized, or they don't work in space, or you can only use them at certain times.
And maybe those ships weren't
better
fully
when they're-
active.
yeah,
That
when-
they had like low power shield on or whatever.
Or, yeah, because they're like stationary.
I'm not gonna get hung up
All
on that.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's fine.
sorry. I had to bring it up.
The thing that I think this movie really hit out of the park immediately on was the production design.
Oh my
Yes!
god!
As soon as I saw the first costume, which is a Harkonnen guard guarding the spice harvesters, I was like, sick. That is a sick costume. I love the way this
Yeah.
looks.
Yeah, I wrote down, I'm like, everything is just on point. Like, I don't think there was anything where I was like, that's weird. Because, like, I read the book. I had these things in my mind. I imagined the design of all of these ships and weapons and stuff, and, like, everything just looked like it. I don't want to say that it looked exactly what I envisioned it, but, like, it was perfect.
It's about the tone. Yeah, my imagination's not as good as Patrice Vermette's, the production designer from this movie, and also Arrival. Clearly, a lot of Arrival carryover here. But man, it's so
Every
fucking
single
cool.
costume too totally communicates like the power dynamics and like how everything works. Like the Fremen, like the still suits are so cool.
Yeah, I wanted to we don't do this normally, but I'm shouting out the costume designers, Bob Morgan, Jacqueline West. You're not listening to this, but you rock.
You're so.
I hope they all win Oscars. Like,
Yeah.
so sick.
The sets too, like they're so striking, and like what I found in this movie, there's the trademark Denis sense of dread, but even when you're on a planet, it feels like space. Like it's so open and like weird and nebulous. Even like when you're in rooms, when you're in buildings,
They're all cavernous
it's
and
so
epic.
cavernous, and it just the whole whole movie feels really alien.
Yeah.
In a really fun
And I
way.
feel like it really paid homage to all its predecessors. Like if you've seen that documentary, Yarovsky's Dune or whatever, I can't pronounce his last name. Yeah, he in the 70s they were gonna make an epic Dune movie. It was gonna be like 10 hours long or whatever, and they didn't. And the designer of that was the guy who went on to do Alien, but this was before Alien, and so a lot of the stuff that you end up seeing in Alien, the design of the xenomorph and everything, was originally the Harkonnen designs.
I see.
And I feel like there's at least a little bit of that DNA is still in the design of Gady Prime and stuff on this movie.
There's a couple like helmets and stuff that felt really 80s in a fun way, and I really love that like the mix of modern and like the Harkonnen are the bad guys.
Yeah.
There's like they feel older but like tougher and stronger. Like it just every costume.
And gross.
Yeah, they just communicate so clearly what those species are like. Or like, are they races or species?
No, they're all humans.
They're all humans. Okay.
Yeah. Although in the world of Dune, there are like humans that have mutated into basically other species.
Every faction is kind of like its own, I wouldn't say maybe species, but variety of human, like including the Bene Gesserit and the Mentats and the Soup Doctors and the Tleilaxu, which are not in this movie, but they're all kind of just like, hey, you want to be this when you grow up? Go train your whole life that way, or be bred for
Is there
it.
anyone that like goes between clans? Like it's like you have like a Romeo and Juliet of like the Harkonnen and the Atreides. Like, is there people that go between them, or is that not just part of this?
Yeah,
feel like
there is, because that's like like Paul said, you know, the Emperor's daughter is not wed yet.
Yeah.
You know, they make alliances.
It is, yeah. It's
Fair.
essentially sort of like a medieval setup with like the emperor and the houses and stuff. It's like Game of Thrones.
That reminds me of I wanted to ask you guys what the comps were for this movie in your mind. Comps being, it's a way when often when you're pitching movies, you can get the vision of your movie into someone else's brain by saying, it's Jurassic Park in space. Or it's James Bond starring Hermione Granger.
Yeah.
This movie, it's like, I don't know, it's Arrival meets Game of Thrones.
Arrival.
Or I think the best comp is it's Star Wars meets Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, this is like Star Wars meets Game of Thrones. Because it's got the whole medieval house situation, fiefdoms, feudalism in
I
space.
can agree with you when you're considering the book, but now that you've seen the movie and the visual aspect of it, that's why I put Arrival in.
Yeah,
the way it looks.
Okay, that's fair. Like if you're talking about just the movie, yeah. But I'd say like in terms of themes and kind of like, I don't know, grandness of scope and kind of like a central hero going through a journey and like changing. That's kind of the Star Wars aspect to me.
Although the hero's journey feels like it's like really starting in the last frame of this movie, I was so pumped by the ending, and I knew I could feel it was the ending, but I was like, oh, this speech, man, this is the first time I feel something in this fucking movie.
Which one?
When he's like, I'm like, my path is to go with the sand people.
Yeah, when his mom is like, his mom is like, please get us off world. He's like, no.
I felt it. I was like, this is so sick. I'm like, I'm ready for the adventure, baby.
Come on, I felt one other moment. How about when he's talking to his dad at the beginning? And he's like, I can't be the king, and instead of being like, you will do it, his dad was like,
feel it.
you're my son.
No, yeah, he's like, I don't know if I should be the Duke or whatever, and he's like, if your answer is no, then you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be.
I wanted to like it, but I don't know. It didn't do anything. If I felt anything else, where it was with the guy who can like roll his eyes back and like get the information.
Mentat,
I was like, I like this guy a lot, and I felt bad when he
he
was like, he's like, I resign because the guy had been like cemented into the wall for 6 weeks. He's like, I should have known. I'm like, dude, how could you fucking know that?
Yeah. Well, he's a mentat.
So he's like psychic.
So yeah,
No, he's not psychic.
This is an interesting point. So they didn't really describe this at all in the movie. But
Actually, one of my main complaints, not enough mentats.
yeah, they didn't. Well,
But go on.
I guess it's not like crucial. Like we get that they're kind of just like smart advisor people.
I'll push back on that later, but I'll have that conversation later.
In the lore of Dune, there was robot wars. I forget what they were actually called in the
Butlerian Jihad.
the Butlerian Jihad. And so like
Jihad, as in like the like
Holy
Muslim
war.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jihad's used in Dune a lot.
There's
because
a lot of Islamic.
Frank Herbert spent time in the Middle East and was inspired by them.
Yeah.
He heavily borrowed and stole from lots of
Well, I would
Middle
argue a
Eastern
lot. It's
kinda-
appreciation.
We can
Anyway,
get into that. We can get into that. But because like colonialism and all this stuff. But anyways, humanity made sentient machines. They had robots, they had droids or whatever. But then the robots revolted. There was a big war, and then humanity banned sentient machines. So they don't have robots anymore. They don't have AI.
Yep.
Instead, they have like bred and trained this class of people called mentats, who are basically like
Human computer.
human computers.
Okay.
So when they roll their heads back, they're like calculating and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think they roll the eyes
Wait
back
a
in the
minute.
book, was it?
I don't think.
I don't know. But
Maybe it was.
It communicates that like something
He's thinking.
special has happened.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
loved that moment too, because when I saw that, and I know I knew in that moment that he was a mentat, and I'm like, oh, that's how they're doing mentats. That's
yeah,
awesome.
but that's all they did. That was like the only moment.
fine.
There's a scene that I really like from the book where they have a like strategic meeting in the war room. They do it kind of in this movie, but it's like a little sequence where they start in the war room, then they jump to like the silos, and then they jump to meeting Stilgar, where he spits on the table. But all of that happens in one meeting in the book, and during that meeting, there's like an appraisal of like what assets do we have on Arrakis, and that's when you really get to see Hawat use his like human computer abilities, where he's just like basically reading off spreadsheets just by memory of like this is how many like harvesters we have, and this is the condition they're in, and what if we do this? And then he goes, well, that's probably going to cost us this much, and it's cool. And then the analog to him on the Harkonnen side is Peter de Vries,
That David.
Dalmatin's character, and he doesn't do shit in this movie
No,
before he
he
dies.
exists to die to make that Oscar Isaac's death has impact, because he doesn't kill the Emperor or the Baron, but knowing that he killed a big henchman felt like made it feel like it was worth it.
Yeah, but in the book, one of the big plot points, and maybe this will be in the sequel, is that the Baron wants a new Mentat and he wants Hawat.
Oh, okay.
But we don't even see. I don't think we even see Hawat get arrested or what happens to him when House Atreides
No,
falls.
but I mean, that's spoilers for book 2, or not book 2. It's second half of book 1.
Same with Josh Brolin's character.
Because I don't think we want to reveal stuff, right?
No, not really. I don't think I've spoiled anything really.
No,
right
you
now.
haven't. I was gonna say something, and I'm like, no, that's
Okay.
good.
I'm asking for minor spoilers for, I guess, the second half. Does Josh Brolin's character still exist? Is he dead?
We can't spoil that.
Well, what do we?
So yes.
What was the last scene we saw with him?
He ran into the fight, and then that's it.
And that's it.
That's
we
it.
don't see him like get arrested or anything like that. Yeah.
So I figured because we didn't see it, he's
Yeah,
probably
James,
If
you
you
are
don't-
revealing. You're revealing.
If
these
you don't see
characters survive.
someone die, like we said last episode, if you don't see someone die in a movie, they're alive.
That's what I figured.
I'll say that.
right?
Yeah. Man, do you want
Some
to
of the characters may return. That's all we'll say.
Another character that I did feel something for is Duncan Idaho. His name made me laugh. No, I actually think that he infuses a lot of humanity in the beginning. The beginning's kind of like, it's just so cold.
Yeah.
And when he shows up and like him and the prince are having a good time, I was like, oh, finally. Like,
Yeah,
there's
'cause
actually
everybody's like
humans.
highborn and
Yeah.
it's all stuffy, and then he's just like
Yeah.
boots on the ground.
Yeah. There's a couple of his lines that just felt weird coming out of his mouth. When he says "my boy," it felt so like that's not how you would speak.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I felt
I don't
so
know.
like
Well,
scripty.
I had some parts with him. I think they were different parts than you're criticizing. Like I felt like he's really good at broing down and being that guy, but he's not so good at any kind of like actual drama. I don't think he's a very strong actor, but he was good enough in this role.
Yeah, Jason Momoa's strength isn't in being like, I'm going to talk low and have emotion. You know, it's more like, hey, bro, yeah. But he executed really well on that, and I felt his connection with Paul.
Totally.
I loved that. I mean, we didn't really get to see them train together, but like Paul, when Gurney Halleck, Josh Brolin's character, comes in and he's like, I'm here to train you. He's like, oh, you're not Duncan or whatever. So we get that feeling that like.
Yeah.
Okay, they usually train together, and they like the scenes where they kind of like hug on Arrakis and stuff. Oh man, he's like, "You put on muscle?" He's like, "Did I?" No.
Yeah, there's only like 2 jokes in this movie, but they were great.
Yeah, they were.
Bad. Okay, but we gotta talk about that. Because the Stilgar meeting, it had no right being that funny.
Which is the Stilgar meeting?
When Javier Bardem's character Stilgar
Oh,
comes
yeah.
in, and like it's all tense. It's like, oh, he comes in and he just like spits on the table, and you're like, wait.
Yeah.
I don't know. The cultural mistranslation there is
Yeah.
so great.
Well, this is clever. Yeah, it's like
It's-
such a good.
It's in the book. It's cool.
Yeah.
This scene. I remember when Stilgar was introduced in the book, I was like, sick. And then the scene in the movie we get was kind of just like a neutered version of it. One thing that I reread.
really?
Yeah, I reread it this morning. If you'll recall, that's the scene where because Duncan Idaho's been kind of working with the Fremen, there was like some little skirmish and a guy like died in his arms. And because Duncan helped out, Stilgar was like gonna give him this Chris knife. And then they make a deal when Stilgar meets Leto. They're like, how about Duncan is like a dual warrior? Like he joins the Fremen, but he still serves the Duke, and he's like this bridge between our people.
Yeah.
And that was a cool setup. But there just wasn't time in the movie really for it.
Well, I
so
feel like we
that's
kinda-
part of that meeting when they meet Stilgar, and that's kind of how they bridge the gap.
I see.
I feel like we kind of got that from Duncan Idaho coming in and being like, oh, I'm telling you about the Fremen because I've lived with them for 2 weeks or whatever it
Yeah.
was. I feel like we got that he was the bridge without that. Because I understand why they didn't have that moment, because they didn't have time to, like, pay off that setup, right? Of, like, him having this sort of relationship
Yeah,
with
because then
Stilgar.
Duncan would have to go away for a time, and then come back, and then the house falls.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job even with that scene in the barracks when he has all the trinkets or whatever, the sand compactor, and they're like, oh, you've gone full native.
Gone
and,
native,
and you can
yeah.
just tell that he's like got a respect and a love for the people.
You can tell that about Duncan, but what you're not getting is the tenuous relationship between Atreides and the Fremen. Like the Fremen have like want really nothing to do with you, and they don't. You do get a bit of this from the
yeah.
Stilgar meeting. You get a bit of it how it's like he doesn't placate to their rules. He doesn't call him sir or my lord or anything. He doesn't really care. But there's just more of that, and it just seems like it's like not going to be easy to win the trust of the Fremen.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this is like a necessary thing because it's a movie and you don't have a ton of time to do this. I feel like we will see more of that tension between like the Fremen like having their own ways and doing their own thing, and Paul kind of trying to like get in there as an outsider.
I'm hoping there's a lot more of that in the
Yeah.
second one, because even with Jameis, the dude he has to fight at the end, I felt like that was more. I don't know. It was just more about that in the book, about like why it had to happen. Like he's evoking these laws of their culture, why like he's entitled to to fight. That he did say that stuff, but it's just like all very quick in the movie.
As someone who hadn't read the book, that stuff lands for me. Like I can totally get it. Where like, oh, there's like the detail and the nuance is probably missing, but like I get that. Like, and it had impact for me. Like I like when Javier Bardem's like, don't do this. Like, come on, man. Like,
you
don't
can't
do this.
yield.
Yeah.
Like, there's no yielding.
Yeah. Or even before when like the
when he's
Fremen
talking
guy
to-
is like, oh, I'm invoking this line. He's like, come on, dude. Like, don't.
The Fremen are an interesting sort of. They're not a character, but they're an interesting group in the story because they are native population, but they are made up of humans who immigrated there initially, right? Because this is in the far future of humanity.
Yep.
It's been thousands and thousands. It's been millennia since humans spread out and like colonized planets and stuff. So this is a native population, but it's a native population that is made up of people of various different ethnicities and cultures. And
Yeah, but you could say that about
you can,
us.
but I think it's interesting that like, unlike a movie like Dances with Wolves or Avatar or whatever, where there are native population, they're completely alien. Like obviously they're inspired by like, you know. Well, okay, Dances with Wolves about actual human population, but Avatar, it's like okay, it's completely alien. With the Fremen, I'm like, I can kind of see little bits of like Western human culture here, you know, because it's derived from that. And then they've kind of like put all their traditions over thousands of years. They've developed their traditions, and now that's on top of that.
Yeah.
But
And one of the sickest things about the book and the Dune franchise is how real it feels because it's like he started. I believe he was a. Are you trying to start a new podcast? Well, Anchor. Are you doing a recorded podcast? Upload it to Anchor or free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or else. You can make money from your podcast right away with no minimum listening. It's easy to make a podcast. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Hi everybody in Podcast Land and also on YouTube. I'm James. David.
I'm Riley.
And today, the Carpool Critics Movie Podcast discusses why we're wearing masks.
Oh,
Just joking. We're going to be talking about The Truman Show, and it turns out we're wearing masks now. Hopefully, you listeners in podcast land can't really hear a difference. And you people on YouTube, well, let us know if this is even worth watching when you can't see our faces.
I know you want to see our whole faces. We're so beautiful, but
It keeps moving when I'm talking. My nose is out now.
Stop. Yeah, we're doing our best here, but at least the dividers are gone.
Hey.
On the podcast platforms, you won't be able. You never even knew we had dividers, but YouTube people, hey, look at this! Look at that beautiful wall.
Regardless of how you listen, just let us know your feedback. If you want us to wear the mask, does it suck? Is it worth it? Let us know. Anyway, let's get into this movie.
And before we do, it's a spoiler alert.
Not very on brand.
No, it's not.
Yeah, you should have done
A
the
Jim
good
Carrey
morning.
freak out.
Well, look, hey, sometimes it's gotta find a funny thing to do, and other times I just need to yell. You know, sometimes you just need to let it out. It's true.
David, what do you give this movie out of 10?
Truman Show, huh? Created in a perfect storm, Truman Show is pathetic, visionary, and near perfectly executed. How is this movie not number one on IMDb? No, 9.3.
Wow. Okay, I was scared there for a second. When we were talking before the podcast, I feel like you indicated that you maybe had some spicy things to say. Yeah.
I still do.
Whoa.
It's not a 10.
That 0.7 is a heavy 0.7. All right.
Riley, give it to me.
I could write a slogan, but how would you know that it's not just part of the script for an elaborate TV show designed to chronicle your entire life? You couldn't know that. But what you can know is that The Truman Show is unique, hilarious, and heartwarming. I love this movie. 9 out of 10.
Wow.
What, James?
No. A near perfect portrayal of a concept we've all thought about that ages incredibly well despite containing no preservatives. 8.75 out of 10. That's
Nice.
a damn good movie.
Yeah.
Really good movie.
Okay, so I'm interested. It's so interesting that you guys rated it that because I was really struggling. I slept through my alarms this morning, so I was like rushing to work, trying to come up with a slogan and rating in my head. And I was like, is it like a 8.75? Is it 8? I'm like, I don't know whether I just like it so much because of the nostalgia lens, but I think. At the end of the day, I was like, I have to give it a like, this is more of a subjective 9. I appreciate that there's my head.
Movie,
It's
man.
Yeah.
a really good movie.
Okay, so I'm interested. It's so interesting that you guys rated it that because I was really struggling. I slept through my alarms this morning, so I was like rushing to work, trying to come up with a slogan and rating in my head. And I was like, is it like an 8.75? Is it 8? I'm like, I don't know whether I just like it so much because of the nostalgia lens, but I think at the end of the day, I was like, I have to give it a like, this is more of a subjective 9. I appreciate that there's quite a few technical things that, like, they could have done better, but
Yeah,
I just love the movie. It works so well.
it's such a brilliant, simple idea.
Yeah.
And they took it to its end game, and they made every little detail of it work. And I'm
Right.
so excited to talk about it after we talk about our sponsor.
Oh, wow. Nice segue, David. Carpool Critics is supported by Vessi Footwear, famous for making shoes that are light, comfortable, and most importantly, waterproof. They're made from a dual climate knit material, and they're 100% vegan, which is completely badass. F the haters. They've got an... They've just announced their The Weekend shoe, which Riley is holding up to the camera. That's what it sounds like. Very classy. So head to Vessi.com/carpoolcritics to reserve your own, or check out their existing lineup and get $25 off using our code. $25 off, guys. I got a pair of their older shoes, and they're 100% pretty cool.
Yeah.
Same, yeah. I love it.
Winter's coming. I'm gonna be wearing them all the time.
Winter came in a day and it left.
That's right.
Season 8 sucks.
We're also brought to you by Private Internet Access VPN. TIA helps you hide your true IP address so that you can bypass geo restrictions and censorship. You can connect up to 10 devices at once, and it includes an internet kill switch.
I don't know what a Truman Show kill switch
If
sounds
your
like.
VPN gets disconnected involuntarily, I would have chosen static, TD static.
Oh.
TIA is available for Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and even as a Chrome extension, so check it out at lmg.gg/carpool.
That should have been Voice of God. Turn off the internet.
You can't leave.
This is Ed Harris.
Ed Harris just like electrocutes him before he can step out the door.
Imagine he just has like a kill switch, a bomb implanted in his neck.
His head explodes on national television.
Oh no.
That would certainly make it more of like a dark comedy than it is.
That's the Japanese version.
Truman Royale.
Yeah.
Man, this movie is awesome, and I think a big part of it, and like even before we get into the actual movie, is how this movie kind of came to be. And so, screenwriter was a super paranoid dude, like unhealthily paranoid. That's why he came up with this script, because he kind of was imagining that everything was centered around him.
As we all
Not
know.
your
Yeah,
fault.
and so he brought it to the studio. The director got on board. They got Jim Carrey, but then Jim Carrey was actually busy doing Liar Liar, so they had a whole year with the screenwriter and the director to like refine the screenplay and change it and like really think about the detail. And they both wrote extensive backstory documents about the whole
Whoops.
world and all the world building.
Oh.
And I think that goes a long way to make this whole concept feel complete and not just thrown together. There's so many little details in this movie that really make it feel so fully realized, and I think that helps to sell the illusion of the Truman Show.
You know what's a good example of that, I feel? When they barely do a nod about how the whole set is constructed, where they reveal in a montage featurette later in the movie that it's a big dome.
Yeah. Right.
But they don't just say, yeah, the set is in a giant dome. They have this little detail, which I feel comes from having time with it.
Yep.
They describe it as one of only 2 objects that you can see from space.
Yeah,
100%.
man-made objects. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the little things like in one of the shots, Truman's sitting there and there's just a little bottle of vitamin D beside him, but of course he needs to take a vitamin D supplement. There's no sun. And like, or all the bridges that you see are so shoddily constructed because they never plan for anything to go over them. And so you,
Right.
like, it's such a small detail in passing. And I honestly don't know if that was planned or just bad set design, but all the pillars are just a little bit crooked and wonky.
Oh, I'm sure that's planned.
That's
Yeah.
so interesting.
And it's just like little details like that that make all the jokes, all the thought-provoking aspects of this movie just land so well.
you know
Hold
what I
on.
realized? We never did the synopsis.
Let's have it now.
Okay. Well, The Truman Show follows Truman Burbank, played by Jim Carrey, the unwitting star of a reality TV show that documents his life 24/7. Truman longs to break the monotony of his life by traveling to Fiji, where an old flame apparently resides, but he's blocked at every turn by the show's creators, who desperately need to keep him within
Chill.
their sphere of idyllic
It's
suburban
fine.
control. Did I say idyllic? Probably.
I like it.
How do you say it?
Idyllic?
Yeah, idyllic, right? The illusion eventually unravels, with Truman confronting the show's creator, played by Ed Harris, and walking off set into freedom. Freedom! Ah, man, well, we'll get to that later, but
We'll save the ending for you.
yeah, that was iconic, man.
I think the movie actually gets better as it goes.
Totally.
I would take off my 1.25 for the first third or first half of the film because it's a little, it's tonally it gets better for me. The first half is kind of slapsticky and weird. Case in point, when the light drops at the beginning of the movie, one of the first indications that the audience sees and that Truman sees that something's off is that this light, a studio light, drops from the sky and lands on the road and breaks. And the shot when it drops is just a weird camera angle, and there's like a slide whistle, like "Ooh!" and it just seems like I'm watching.
There's a
like
slide whistle.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
well, you're probably listening on laptop speakers.
No, I'm not. Because this was the first movie that we've done for the podcast that I watched on my brand new 65-inch TV.
Oh, it's HD.
Oh, no.
And it's like totally understimulated.
Hey man, it
It's
was
nice TV. I saw it.
it was great.
Yeah.
No. I mean, the movie is
Oh.
1080p now,
And I
not
take-
4K.
Yeah.
And I take back everything I said about watching a laptop. I don't. It's not that different.
I actually had to watch it on a laptop because my TV was occupied by my girlfriend and her friend watching Blade Runner. So.
Oh,
This is upside down world.
Blade Runner. Wow.
But anyways, it comes down and it's just like, and it breaks, and it's just a little weird. And then it's just kind of like that. I think one of the things that contributes to that is that Jim Carrey, casting Jim Carrey,
Yeah.
on the one hand is perfect, but on the other hand is awful.
Right.
When he's just a normal guy who apparently was just like a random tenacious baby that they chose from a group of 5 babies, newborns. Newborns.
That is one tenacious baby.
Well, he was the one that like he arrived
worked.
first or whatever, right?
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
born on time, so they choose him as a newborn, right? So you might just get like the most mundane dude, you don't know, but they happen to get Jim Carrey. So in the mundane scenes where he's just like, in case I don't see ya, hey! It's just, he's like kind of larger than life to a degree that's kind of unbelievable. But
Yeah.
then, when he's realizing that his world is a lie and he's going mad,
Yeah.
then he's a perfect cast for that.
Yeah, it's true. I was like wondering. I was like, what if? Well, both in the universe and in the movie universe and in our universe. I'm like, what would they have done in the universe, in the movie, if Truman ended up being like a jerk? Like they're like, oh, hopefully he's good on TV.
Yeah, there's a few things. I think that part of it is that Christoph is shaping Truman, so
Yeah.
he's parenting him from afar,
Right.
shaping him to be the best entertainer he can be. But there's a version of the script where Truman kind of sucks. So the original version, written by Andrew Nichols, or is that Andrew Nichols is the writer, was a much more cynical script.
I also read the script. I read apparently the shooting script.
Okay.
I don't know how many versions there are, but if it says shooting script on it,
There was 14 drafts written in that year, so there was probably more before. So there's lots of.
even the shooting script that I read was more. Almost everything that's in it is in the movie. Almost. Some of it's moved around, but the beginning in particular, he's more like rebellious and jaded and cynical. He gets there later in the movie, but right from the first, right from the beginning, he's kind of like that. And so I guess they would have anything that they changed for the movie, they must have changed either on set or editing.
There's a combo. There's definitely a lot of. I think Jim Carrey brings a lot to a movie. Like I don't know which version of the script I read, but they're like the scene when he's talking to the mirror and he's talking about like, if I die, promise me you'll eat me. And ew, gross. I think that was improvised because in the script it's talking about the mountain, but it's just like talking about how difficult it is going to be to rise. But there's a characterization that he brings. But there's also stuff in the original script like. He witnesses a sexual assault but fails to step in.
What?
Yeah, there's a scene where he's driving his car and he's at a red light, and then there's a woman on a bench, and he can see these two like thug ruffians harassing her, and he steps out of his car and like stands up and like pays attention, and then they actually end up dragging her into the bushes, and she's yelling and stuff, and he does nothing, and then I think a car comes behind him and honks because it's green, and he gets back in his car and drives away,
Oh my
and then the
God.
actors go. Physical violence always paralyzed him, and so, of course he would act that way.
That would be a much darker movie for sure.
But I think that they didn't put it in because it takes focus away from his other fears. Like in the movie, they just focus on he's afraid of water.
yeah,
And,
we don't want to give him too many. I mean, he probably has quite a few neuroses, or I would expect that somebody does.
Well, they show them later in the movie, and in the script they're in the first 10 pages. But when he's in class and he's like, I want to be an explorer, and the
Yeah.
teacher's like, everything's been discovered, idiot.
Yeah.
That's in the movie. They just moved it to a later section where it's like a fake interview with Christoph, the creator of all this. And so it makes sense to have these kind of flashbacks when he's explaining how he got Truman to be the way he is.
Right. The other scene, importantly, there is when he's climbing the rocks and he's at the beach, and his dad's like, "No,
Yeah.
don't look over that rock face to the set that we haven't got prepared yet."
Yeah.
That's his first flashback in the movie, in the shooting script.
Oh, okay.
And then the next flashback is his dad dying from the boat.
Like, you gotta know your limitations, Truman.
Yeah, and in the script it's very particular. Every single flashback must be played on a TV. And it's like,
Oh, interesting.
But they
No.
didn't do that in
Thank
the
goodness.
actual. Well, what they do instead is they've got like that kind of vignette effect on the side of the
Yeah.
camera that looks like an eye or a
Well,
small.
that's all the hidden camera shots.
Yeah, so they do that with the flashback. But the opening shots of the movie, they have Truman when he's talking to the mirror. That's like on a TV.
Yeah.
Which is weird. One, I think, with the biggest departure from the script actually is that in the script, you are discovering that it's a show while Truman discovers it's a
Right.
show. But in the movie, the opening shots are the creator being like, well, he's describing the show.
Yeah,
so the
yeah.
audience is like, okay, it's a TV
And
show.
I was saying that because I was like, oh man, I wonder. I feel like it would be a very different movie if we slowly discovered this over the course.
it would be very Matrix-esque,
Yeah.
but I like this the way it is because I think you get attached to Truman and you're more like on board with like his journey because you're like, come on, Truman, you can do it. Whereas,
Yeah,
whereas
yeah.
instead, a lot of your energy, your emotional energy, would be spent on what's going on.
Yeah, and I think you're right that there is a strength to like having us be with him on his journey from the start. I think if we were like, what the heck's going
Yeah,
on,
what
and
is the
only
journey?
like halfway through we discover that it's a television show, then yeah, that journey is just kind of cut in half.
Something I didn't realize until I was doing the research for this we watched, all those like interview bits weren't shot for the movie. They were shot for like a fake, like a mockumentary for a behind-the-scenes featurette.
No,
on the
they
DVD.
weren't.
Yes, they were not part of the script.
What are you talking about?
So they when they were like conceptualizing the movie and they were doing all their like prep stuff, they were like, we should make a fake documentary about the Truman Show, and so they filmed all these interviews. They filmed all these interviews with the actors trying to like be like, this Truman Show is real, and like, oh, when I act for the Truman Show, like I make sure that I'm like engaged all the time or whatever. But then he was like, oh, I like the way that this kind of grounds the Truman Show movie in reality, and so
Right.
he interspliced all those interview bits to like really make the Truman Show, the movie, feel like a real thing.
Yeah, how did you guys feel about the fact that, so like we know from the get-go that it's a TV show, but then there is still sort of like a half reveal when we first see Christoph and he's like orchestrating the meeting between Jim Carrey and his dad. There's like a things are fleshed out more. I feel like up to that point we understand that Truman is being watched and like he's on a TV show and he's being broadcast, but we don't know the extent of like what the setup is or like how many people are being hired for this type of thing. And so then in that moment,
Yeah, that's when it switches.
we meet Christoph and then we also get like the flashback, or not flashback, but it's like
A montage,
it's
featurette.
yeah, it's an explanatory montage about how he was like filmed as a
Yo.
baby and all that stuff. But I'm like, that's kind of like a weird place to put it, right in the middle there.
Well, I think that, I mean, that's a script writing thing. You reveal your villain's true nature or like a thing about your villain at the halfway point of the movie and it changes the stakes.
Well, no, that's fine, but I think the whole thing about like Truman was picked from a baby. Well, I guess he's explaining all that, isn't he?
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
I think it works better there than at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because you want to have unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And it's cool that they finally give it to us. And they use that opportunity because that is the moment where we go from inside looking out to outside looking in. Because they show us that sequence where Truman is reunited with his father, right? And we get to see the television producers and the creator orchestrate that moment and get to see him, turn the music up here and
Yeah.
go to wide shot and go to close up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then, so now we're in their world. Okay, so now that we're outside the bubble, let's see some life outside the bubble, and then they air that expository montage. And so
Right.
I think it totally works.
Yeah, okay, no, you're right. I think I was a bit confused though, because I was like, what? This is like a explanatory montage that's usually in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
But
But
maybe,
I'm glad they did
maybe
it.
that's how they fix this.
I was curious how you guys feel about kind of that moment. This movie, I think, isn't as interested in making you feel as opposed to engaging your mind or your imagination, where like that moment, he's reuniting with his dad that he hasn't seen for whatever, 20 years.
Yeah.
But they're undercutting it because they're showing you the TV side and they're having the director be like, wait for the close-up, zoom in,
Yeah.
zoom in,
It's
and
really
then it pops in the close-up, and like everyone's like, yeah, great,
Yeah, yeah.
awesome, and they're undercutting, I think, the emotionalism of that moment for the idea of what's going on. But
Well,
what do you guys think of that?
I disagree with you, actually. I think they're just giving you a different emotion. Instead of you feeling what Truman is feeling, of like, oh my god, I love you, Dad, and I'm so sad, you're getting the twisted feeling of
Yeah.
like, that powerful emotion that he's feeling is artificial.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's for these people enjoying it. And then your skin is crawling, and it's just a different emotion.
That's
yeah,
totally
it's like
fair.
horror a little bit. Yeah.
It's great. I love that moment.
I also love how it's meta in terms of like we're watching a movie that is specially crafted in order to make us feel things, and we are watching somebody in that movie specially craft something in order to make us feel things.
The score in that moment is interesting.
Oh, yeah,
'Cause
it's great.
I think it does go with what you're saying, where it's like it's kind of schmaltzy and emotional, but it also has like kind of some weird, darker undertone
Yeah.
that's not about like this emotional payoff.
No.
Yeah, and like the synth is like.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting. I'd say overall the score does its job. I think it underserves the movie a little bit. I'd say that might be the weakest element of the movie. is
Really?
The score by Philip Glass.
The one thing that I thought was like the most definitely one of the most iconic things about this movie was that the scene where he's like he kind of figures out that like something's going on, and so he decides to break routine. He goes into the revolving door and goes around
Oh,
like 3
yeah.
times, and then comes back out into the courtyard instead of going into his job. And he kind of like is like looking around like, oh, what if I go and tie my shoe right now? What if I suddenly cross the street? Oh. And the music there is like, dun, 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 dun. And it's so like, it's kind of like it's almost like an army kind
Totally,
of like I think there is a little bit of like a
snare?
yeah. And it's just like
I thought the music there was really good.
it's so introspective. Yeah, I love it.
It's really like, it's like you can hear his mind expanding.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
It's like a kind of uplifting,
And that-
liberating.
And it's
music.
also a weird. I was trying to time it because before the main theme comes in, I was like, what time signature is it? Because it's kind of like it's got some weird rhythms going on with it. I was like, oh, okay, it's like 6/4 or 6/8 or whatever. But before that comes in, it's like you're trying to figure it out, and it's like, oh, this is like a weird time, and I feel like it's kind of disorienting in the same way that you know that Truman is kind of disoriented.
Oh, you're right, and like I think that kind of simple score really works to push an idea, and I
Yeah.
think those moments are pushing a very specific idea,
Yeah.
and I think like the ending works very well for the score. I just feel like there's moments in the movie where I was distracted by the music a little bit,
Oh,
and it might
really?
be just that it's dated and that the instrumentation is a little bit 90s.
Yeah.
To me, it was a hit or miss. There's
Yeah.
moments like the one you're describing, and later on when it gets intense and he's
Yeah.
at sea and stuff.
Oh,
great.
The music for those moments was great. The music for the mundane moments in his house was kind of too whimsical and like
Yeah.
poppy. I didn't really like
Man,
that.
I don't
stuff,
even remember that music at all.
but There you go.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I kind of want to go back a little bit to how you were talking about you don't like the tone of the first half. I think they made a choice because they were very much going for like a 1940s white suburban area.
I guess we're seeing the tone that the audience is seeing.
totally
Of this show.
and I think it works for that, like the goofy moments where it's like his butt in the foreground and he's like turning back and it's like, you missed a spot, Truman.
Yeah.
And all those stuff. It's very like 40s sitcom-y, and to me it works to set up the more like grounded 90s feeling ending.
Right.
But
Maybe the
gritty dark
tone-
90s.
Maybe the tone is intentionally inconsistent because the tone itself is morphing as the reality changes from show to this is the real world, and we get it kind of taken along.
he gets unplugged from the Matrix.
It really
does.
is. It's like a
Crazy.
predecessor to the. It's like a prequel to the Matrix
Totally, yeah.
because
Yeah.
he's a prisoner, right?
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
And Sylvia calls it as much, but it's like you've heard arguments for people who come from authoritarian countries who might say, you know, as long as that government does a good job, what's the problem? You know, you might call it Orwellian, but like, hey, if they're doing a great job and the people like them, what's the big deal
Yeah,
about having
yeah.
freedom? And that's exactly the world he lives in. He's a prisoner, but he's in this suburban, you know, like beautiful, idyllic world where he has no problems. And why would you want to leave? But the point is that he should have the option to leave.
Right.
And in the Matrix, they talk about how previous Matrixes being too perfect. And it's like, okay, Truman, he knows that stuff is going wrong. There's, as the Matrix says, there's a splinter in his mind where it's not real, right? So it's like, is the problem then, to speak to those proponents of authoritarianism, is the problem that his prison isn't real enough? And it's like if you just made a better person, then you could land where it's like, yeah, you're a slave, but it's fine. And that's kind of what the Matrix is. It's a more convincing a more convincing world than even Sea Haven. They made an even better prison.
I think that the movie isn't really interested in exploring that. I think it's more interested in proposing that the human spirit demands freedom.
Right.
And that the human spirit is curious and needs to feel liberation to do what it wants to do. And that's like I think that's a value that Hollywood really pushes. It's like you're free, like your freedom.
For sure.
Your individuality.
I think that Christoph kind of like exemplifies the thing that you were talking about, because he clearly says explicitly to Truman that like there's nothing out there that's better than what you're gonna find in here. Like it's all the same, like same lies. Like the only difference is that in here you're safe. So I think that it really is.
And they're trying to make a particular type of world that the creator thinks is better.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's clean, it's white. There's literally one black family, and they're written in the script.
Oh,
And when
yeah?
he waves to his neighbors, it says an African American family.
God.
And he's wearing a business suit and he's got his white people voice on, right?
Yeah.
And everyone else in the town's white.
There's a bus driver.
Yeah, that's true.
Bus driver.
That's
black,
true.
but yeah.
And it's Protestant, right? There's
Yeah,
there's two instances where they talk about religion. It's when the interview with his wife, where she's like, living in Sea Haven, it's a blessed life.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know? And then later on, when they're looking
Marlon.
at the sun, Marlon's looking at the sunset, and he's like, that's the big guy
That's the
upstairs.
big guy.
Quite a paintbrush he's got.
Heck of a paintbrush. I thought that Truman was gonna say something there, like I don't know, something cynical or whatever. But I guess he's.
The only parts of the movie at all that might argue, and I feel like this is almost it's not in the movie, and it should be, is suggestions that we're all under some kind of control. We're all being manipulated by the media. They don't really do that. Like you're saying, the movie's not really interested in doing that. I agree with you there, but there is a glimpse of it when you're in Sylvia's apartment, because she has all this activist memorabilia on the wall.
Yeah.
She has a poster that says like "Free Truman." Who's next? Our children.
They're gonna have individual TV shows for every one of our children.
In the backstory that was written, the backstory document, there is other shows, and so there's a bunch of copycats. Like there's
No way.
I think it's called like Me Ling My Life. It's like a Taiwanese show that's like a knockoff, and it didn't last very long. And like,
Right.
there's dozens, because like it's the biggest sensation. It's $1 billion TV show.
Yeah.
And so everyone's trying to recreate it, but no one can capture the Truman Show because he's
Right.
so special.
I like the idea that it's like a truly global phenomenon. I like when they're like cutting to all the different people in different places, like looking at it. Like,
I love when movies do that.
Yeah.
They do that in Unstoppable as well. I love when there's just all these different parties in different locations. You cut back, they're all invested, and it really makes it has a purpose in a movie functionally, where when we cut back to this like crowd in a bar who are all waiting with bated breath looking at the screen, they're feeling the tension. We see them do that, we mirror it.
Totally.
Yeah.
When we see them go, yes!
Yeah,
we mirror it, so it's really effective and evocative, getting the emotional payoffs that you want.
I have the weirdest bit of trivia that I found in my backstory document that makes I have no idea what that was written in, but the dude in the bat, that's Napoleon from the original Bill and Ted. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Anyways, in the document, it's written in the final moments of the Truman Show, he got so excited that his TV dropped into the bathtub and killed him.
no! Wait.
Why did they write that?
Oh, that's in the movie.
Yeah, well, but they don't show it. But
Oh my
in the document of like, these are the
Yeah.
people in the story. He's dead at the
Man,
end of the
there is a
show.
much darker version of this movie that could have existed.
Totally.
That's wild.
Well, it's funny, in the thing, there's the Peter Weir version of the document, and then there's the Andrew Nichols version of the
Peter Weir
document.
being the director.
Peter Weir being the director. And he did like Dead Poet Society. And Andrew Nichols.
Master and Commander.
Yeah.
So Andrew Nichols wanted it to be a bit darker.
In the Peter Weir version, he talks about how Christoph remains young by having blood transfusions. And there's like
Oh,
a
wow.
few other details.
Got a
in
blood boy.
But in the other one, he's like,
that he gets from the
Blood-
other
the blood-
babies
yeah,
that they didn't use.
they're just
God.
blood. He's like, the blood transfusion, all these other things, those are just rumors. And he
Oh my
they started
God.
having like competing ideas of what the backstory was.
See, now this is interesting. I'm really glad that Peter Weir, undark humored this movie a little bit, because, and I was confused because when I was looking it up before we recorded, it was like, oh, this is a comedy, black comedies, Jim Carrey movies. Like one of the categories was like black comedy, and I was like, Oh, it doesn't really. I don't remember it being that dark, But
No.
But this makes a lot more sense now. But I'm glad that it's not as much of dark humor because I think that if this was another, Larry the Cable Guy or something,
Gosh.
I would be like, wait,
Yeah.
No, you mean the cable
the
guy.
cable guy, just the cable guy. I'm glad I corrected myself on that. That would have been embarrassing. If this was another like the cable guy, I feel like it would not have been as iconic and memorable.
No, definitely not.
Like not as many people talk about the cable guy being like, oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a few people love it.
There's like a couple good memes that I still do. That Star Trek thing.
Yeah, no, it's a funny
You don't
movie.
remember what I'm talking about? They go to medieval times and they battle, and then
Yeah,
he
yeah.
does like. He's pretending that he's doing that like Klingon fight from Star Trek,
Oh, I
where
see.
they've got like the Klingon weapon,
Yeah.
and he's like going up in his face with it.
It's a funny movie. But it doesn't hit you on that same sort of like emotional.
Because it's darker,
Yeah.
you're saying?
No, because
Because
this
less
is
dark.
The cable guy is darker, and because of that, I think you are more horrified the whole time that this guy is like clearly off his rocker, and so in this one, I feel like you have a bit more of an emotion. You're able to kind of like root for the characters a bit more.
Definitely, because there's no menace.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
Well, there is menace, but that's the funny thing is that the menace is external. Like it is horrifying, as you say, when we're hearing, when we see that scene of him reuniting with his dad, and we see kind of behind the scenes a little bit. It is horrifying. We're like, oh my gosh, we are seeing in excruciating detail just how orchestrated every single.
Yeah, but the
the thing for
menace,
me-
the worst case of the menace is that he just has a boring life. Whereas
it's
in
not that
Cable Guy, the menace is like, is this guy gonna like?
It's not that he has a boring life. It's that none of it is real in any way. He hasn't experienced life at all. Yeah, the horrifying part for me in that scene was Christoph feeding Marlon the line. Yeah. As Marlon is making the case to Truman that he's like, hey, we're best friends, man. We've known
tearing
each other.
up.
We've known each other since we were 7.
Yeah.
And Marlon is he's doing
tearing
such
up.
a good
Yeah,
job
yeah.
as an actor and you can see Truman being like, you're right, man. You're so right. And like, I don't understand. In that moment, I was like, how could Marlon live with himself? Like,
Totally.
none of this is. I'm sure that there's some ad-libbing going on in his performance, but like in that moment, none of it is genuine. It's all coming from Christoph.
And what's the incentive for that actor? Because it's like he's obviously making a ton of money, but he lives in Sea Haven. Like,
Well,
when does he get to go home and spend his money?
in the backstory documents, he's one of the richest people on the planet. His candy bar is the 3rd most popular candy bar on the planet because anything he promotes is huge. He's like top 3 stars on the entire planet because he's the main character or one of the main characters on the big show, and so it's
Yeah, I was
it's
wondering
well
about
worth
that.
it for him. And
yeah, but when does he get to
I
enjoy
assume
that?
that-
they have time. They have like rotating times off where they get to like have a couple weeks.
I guess
or
he
whatever.
did say there was a time where he was like doing some work with chickens in some other place. Remember, Truman's like working travel through. He's like, oh, I was all over. So he could have like taken 6 months off.
Yeah, there's like interesting stuff. Like his mom has had terminal illnesses like 19 times because he kept wanting to travel, and so she would get down with a major illness, and he'd have to come back and stuff. I love that this is a more optimistic movie because it means that like anyone can watch this. Like that's
Yeah.
why I wrote that in my slogan. This should be the #1 movie on IMDb because like who doesn't like the Truman Show?
See, but this is the thing is that I think watching it this time, I acknowledge that, like what you were saying earlier, James, where, I mean, we're going back to that scene with the dad, the reuniting of the dad and son. I think that serves to undercut any real emotion that we might actually feel about Truman. I think that even when he's like in the boat trying to like finally escape, I'm still kind of watching it as like we're not just watching Truman on his journey, right? Which would be more emotional. We would be more invested in his emotional journey if we were like more connected to him that way. We're watching him through Christoph orchestrating stuff, and then also through the fact that like it's a TV show and then other people are watching it too, and we're watching the people watching him.
Yeah, I'd say that we're not getting the grape juice of that emotion. We're not just squeezing it, but we're kind of getting like a wine version of it, where it's
Yeah.
been fermented and changed. And I think that it makes it more complex. And I want to
It
talk
does
about.
make it more complex.
I want
but-
to talk about that ending because I think it might be my favorite ending of any movie ever.
It's really, really good.
It's
great.
so
Solid.
powerful.
The moment where how early you want to start? He's on the boat. Okay, first of all, his character arc is kind of ending when he's sailing himself, right? He's on the water. He's taking the final step. Like he's basically crashing through all the barriers they've created for him, all this manufactured fear of the water, and sailing himself to the edge of the earth. Flat earthers. Yeah, he's doing it.
Yeah.
He's doing it.
Such a great shot when the boat just like hits the edge,
Oh,
pierces through the wall.
That's like the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
yeah, I think I would describe the visual, the wide shot of the water with the big dome and the sailboat just in the little corner, and he starts walking away as a perfect shot.
Oh, yeah,
It
yeah,
is like there's nothing wrong. They couldn't make that shot better. It's
No,
so powerful.
fantastic. He's
So you're
like
talking
walking.
about like he's already the boat has crashed into the bounds of the set.
Yeah.
Into the wall. He steps off the boat and there's a little tiny
So yeah,
ledge.
just
that
an
he
extreme
curves.
wide, and he's probably like an inch tall on the screen.
Yeah.
And it's just such an incredible visual. Like it's so surreal. Like
Yeah.
crashing into the end of the world. Like when he's slamming into it, crying,
Yeah.
and they even commit to the extra layer of processing emotion by having him have his breakdown from behind. I think another movie would have a
Yes.
close up on him breaking down, slamming into the
I
wall,
kn-
but
I
this
kn-
movie commits to you're an external viewer watching Truman. But this is the moment that you don't get to see him
Yeah.
because he's breaking through. He's having his like, I'm becoming free from this TV show moment because you see it from behind for the first time.
I
Oh, you're
really-
saying that's kind of more like a first-person view thing. So
No,
No.
It's more that you don't get to see his reaction
Yeah.
because he's breaking free from the
that,
show.
that whole shot
Oh,
where
I
he's
get it.
breaking against the wall.
I think that's one of the best
yeah.
parts. You see it all through the perspective of just his hand. And at first, it's like a 2001 Space Odyssey thing where the monkeys touch the monolith, and they're like, it's trepidation.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah.
should I touch it? And then his hand rests on it. And that is when it's like clicking for him. Like his whole life is gaslighting.
Yeah.
And this, when his hand makes
Absolutely.
contact with that wall, it's like validation.
Right.
And then you see him go through every
yeah, 'cause
emotion.
Up to that point, he wasn't 100% sure.
No, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
His entire life is gaslighting.
Yeah.
And then when his hand makes contact with it and he gets that validation, he then proceeds to go through every emotion known to man. But we only see the hand. He gropes the wall. He pounds on the wall.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I made a note of that shot as well, that like we don't see his face. There's one point in that shot where he kind of like turns to the left and we kind of see the emotion on his face. But for the rest of it, that's one unbroken shot.
Yeah.
It goes on for a long time and we don't see his face.
It
It's like
was-
such an interesting creative
I bet they
decision.
shot it. I'll bet they had
Yeah, I
the
could
coverage
see
of
that.
it.
Probably,
Oh,
because you
probably.
would want to get it. It would
Oh,
be so
for
easy
sure.
to get.
Yeah.
But it was, I think it's a strong choice that I think, it goes to making the emotion of this movie feel like wine instead of grape juice.
Right. No,
it's awesome.
But see, this is the funny thing. I think even in that moment, I was watching it and I'm like recognizing. I'm like, oh, this is great. That's a great shot. I'm loving this journey. But I wasn't like emotional myself. And I think maybe that's because I've seen the movie. Like I think I didn't know how many times I've seen this movie, but watching it this time, I was like, oh, I might have seen this movie like 6 or 7 times or something.
Riley, how
which is
could you?
Which is a long,
Yeah,
which
for
is
you.
a lot for me. But like, I think I watched it a lot as a kid. But anyways, maybe it's because of that. But I almost feel like the fact that I wasn't super emotional is also because of that kind of distance that I was describing earlier. That like it makes the whole setup a lot more interesting. It makes it more like intellectually stimulating, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about all the different things that this would mean, the technical aspects of it, and the levels of morality and all that stuff. And so I think that really keeps you away because it's more intellectual.
Totally. I think I would describe this movie as engaging my imagination more than my heart.
Right.
And that's fine. And that's why it's
Oh,
not a 10 out of 10.
I don't think
If-
it's bad.
If I was crying at the end of this movie, it would be like a 10 out of 10.
How did
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
feel during the sailing scene when Kristoff is telling them ramp up the waves?
I felt anger,
Sad,
frustration, sadness.
And then I love how it's on TV. Like there's an earlier line where they're like, "Are you gonna do X on live TV?" So
Yeah.
they, you know that they have a line. And then when Truman's on the boat and he's like, "Kill me! You're gonna have to kill me!" That was so awesome. And you're like,
Yeah.
"That's on TV." The whole world got to see that,
Yeah.
and that's kind of sick.
But you know what's
oh, no, I was just going
And
to
I don't mean sick as in sweet. I mean
Yeah.
it's kind of sick.
I found that whole
Like that the
sequence-
world has to
Messed
see
up.
that.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
world, it's like he's holding a mirror up to every audience member, right?
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah, there's a million ways they could have shot that storm sequence, but the way they did it is so effective at like making you feel like he's really going under the boat, flipping. And
Yeah.
I really felt it this time. And did you guys know Jim Carrey almost drowned during that filming of that
Wow, I
sequence?
believe it.
Because it's in a tank, and they're shooting jet engines at him to get all the storm
Oh
and all
my
the water.
gosh.
And at one point,
he did the signal that I can't breathe anymore, and they're supposed to save him, but they thought it was just part of his acting. He went under and disappeared, and the divers couldn't find him.
Whoa, what?
But he had made it to the back of the tank, and he was able to like grab the wall and hold on and like.
Oh my god.
But like
They
it was-
put-
the divers were like,
How
"Where did
big
he
is this
go?"
tank?
It's pretty big because you're filming.
Jeez,
the
There's
whole-
a full
Louise.
boat in there.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And you totally believe that Kristoff was gonna kill him because they say like, are you gonna kill him? And he's like, well, he was born on TV.
Yeah.
Like, and he died.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I think that. What do you guys think of the fact that Kristoff tried to get him to stay? Like, I think that that really worked on a thematic level because Kristoff really is this sort of like abusive, possessive
God
parent.
complex.
Yeah, God complex as well, where he's just like, I know what's best for you. You don't know anything. Trust me. Like, there's nothing out there for you. Stay here. There's so many abusive parents and guardian figures that have done that to characters, and it really works on that level. But on another level, I'm like, what is he? Truman
knows
can't
it's
come
a show.
back now. He knows it's a show. What are you gonna do? Like, okay, Truman, you pretend too.
Yeah.
Well, the creator's kind of up against his own dilemma and his own morality there, because earlier he says, I believe it's when Sylvia calls in, he says, hey, if Truman really wanted to leave, he could leave. And then he actually has to stand by that later on. When Truman is really, really, really trying to leave, and he goes, well, how bad do I want him to stay? How bad do I need to have the first televised consummation to happen? Because there's a deleted scene where there's
you sent us this.
a panel, all the actors are in the back room, and the creator is giving them a briefing. Okay, here's what's going to happen. The wife, she's off the show. She doesn't want to be here anymore. We got this new cutie who's going to take over as a love interest. And this is critical. Your role is critical because when you have that baby, we're passing the torch. Now we're going to have two shows. There's going to be a show for Truman and a
Right.
show for the baby. That's the next generation, the next 30 years of television. It's all of our paychecks. All these things are at play.
That's interesting.
Or no, just what stood out to me in that scene is Marlon being like, so what happens when Truman dies? With
Yeah.
zero heart, zero passion. And I wish
Does it go back to one show? That's
did
what
to go
it
back to
was,
one
yeah.
show, and he's just. It made me a little bit sad, and I think maybe that would have engaged our hearts a bit more if someone on the show cared about Truman a
Right.
little bit more. Because Marlon has grown up with him since he was a
Totally.
child for 29 years, and he just doesn't give a fuck about
Yeah,
Truman.
that's so.
It made me
it's
sad.
such a cynical take
Well,
that like
totally.
the people who are super involved in his life wouldn't actually. And the thing that made that even darker for me was the fact that he said, "So what happens when Truman dies? Do we go back to one show?"
Yeah.
Indicating that he'd still be around if when Truman dies.
Yeah, you'd be God.
Why do you think they cut that scene? Was it too dark?
I think it's too dark.
Too dark. It's also not that funny. It doesn't really add that much. It's kind of weird and creepy. I think it turns Ed Harris' character too dark.
Well, but he's pretty dark.
Yeah, but
You gotta be kind of screwed up to.
I think Ed Harris brings a warmth to the role. Because it was supposed to be Dennis Hopper, and they filmed a bunch of days with Dennis Hopper, but he just didn't know his lines, so they fired him.
Well, they have this scene I was going to ask you about, and it's the scene where I believe it's after the creator has just really done some harm to Truman, but there's a shot of, it's after Truman has like kind of broken through and had that montage that Riley was talking about where he's like testing the limits of the world and trying to run into buildings and he sees behind the curtain a little bit. And
smacks the
yeah,
electrician's butt and nothing happens. It's so great.
I didn't even notice that. But
When he comes out of the when he comes out of the elevator building, he's like, okay, I got kicked out of there, and his last kind of act of defiance before he runs away is just he smacks the electrician's butt with his briefcase and then runs away. The electrician doesn't respond at all. It's so funny.
But he
Okay, sorry.
takes his wife on this journey where they're leaving town, right?
Yeah.
Oh, how convenient and synchronized! We're blocked at every turn, and then
Yeah.
he goes, and they're finally blocked by this nuclear disaster.
Right.
And all these people in hazmat suits like take him down.
Yeah.
I believe it's after that Kristoff is watching the night cam of Truman sleeping, and he's petting the camera on Truman's nose. And I was like, what is this shot trying to tell us? I think it's going back to what you're saying, where he's not completely evil. He loves Truman in a way. He feels like he is Truman's creator or father in a way.
But that doesn't. You're implying that people who are evil or who do evil things can't love.
No, I'm saying he's doing both.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
the
Sorry.
shot that tells us that.
Right. He's a complex character for sure. But I think that there is no. I think that the idea of doing this to somebody and that's completely messed up. I mean, but absolutely, I completely agree with you that he has he has this sort of like father relationship. He feels that well, they say specifically that Truman was he was the first baby to be adopted by a corporation.
Made my skin crawl.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's gross.
It's
Eh?
like, ugh.
He also says
But
like
corporations are people, so.
they're entities. They specifically say that multiple times. You were real. You know, Truman, you're real. Your
Yeah.
emotions are real.
Yeah.
His name is True Man.
Yeah.
I know.
Right?
I love that.
Thank
But-
you. I was waiting for when that would come out.
But to what extent is that true? Because clearly they're gonna kind of curate this world. He is a reflection of what they give him. He's a product of the environment they create for him.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And they don't really explicitly tell us this, but when he meets his mom, the first scene with his mother, they're in her living room, above the mantle. There is a self-portrait. There's a portrait of his mother in his mother's living room. She has a portrait of herself. She has her own damn face
Yeah, that's-
painted in her living room.
That's weird.
And I was like, did they? You know, she's kind of like an overbearing, kind of crazy mom.
Yeah.
And like, do you think that if you're the one running this show, you probably would do this? Would you make characters like, oh, we got to give him an insane mom? We have to throw in drama to make his life more interesting to
No,
watch.
absolutely, yeah.
I think that he is the true man in the truest sense that you could capture on film, because like reality TV is people know there's cameras there, so they present a false version of themselves. So even though he's curated by Christoph, he lives as authentically as he can, and that's as authentic as a camera could ever capture a person.
I guess so. I mean, you could have hidden cameras and not actors.
So
You
they
could have
more backstory built into this backstory document.
Trivia bot
Christoph
strikes
Yeah.
again.
Sorry, guys. I just find it so interesting.
Pull the lever.
Pull the lever. The Christoph's previous work before this was he worked with a guy whose uncle owned an inner city building, and so they wired it up with a bunch of like cameras, basically like a Truman Show, but inside this building. And then they opened it up to like inner city kids, and so they had this like 24-hour surveillance documentary of inner city life, and they captured like all the drugs, all the sex, all of this. And that might be more authentic, but
Yeah.
it also would have been a really weird movie.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I they tell him that like you were real, but I don't think. Yeah, I don't know which one of you was saying that, but I don't think he was real. I think that's messed up. It's like he's a construct.
For sure, but I guess he, as a human, is like the purest form of actor a person could be. Because you're right, he's not a human, he's a created product.
Yeah,
to
he's the,
give the
like you said,
emotion.
he's the closest you could get while still creating something. But he's a human in the sense that like inputs and outputs, right? Like they control the inputs, and then the outputs that he reflects back are human reactions.
No, for sure, for sure.
Can we talk about Sylvia though?
Yes, please.
Like that's the most interesting part of this movie. Is
Yeah.
Sylvia.
I every time I watch this movie, I always hate that he starts out unfaithful to his wife. I wish they set it up. They set it up pretty early that why he cares about Sylvia, and it's not just love. It's also she has a lot of answers. But it always makes me like him a little bit less. That like right off the bat, he's just like,
Well,
"Damn,
what's
That's fair.
unfaithful in what sense? The fact that he has
before
like
you
this
even see,
picture that he's trying
he's
to create.
building this picture of this woman, and it's like it's kind of like it's hard. You need a visual thing in the film. It's better than him in like writing in a journal or something. Sylvia, whatever.
Well, okay, wait.
But it's also like kind of weird and serial killery
Do
that
you-
he has this like cutout
yeah, no, it's definitely
assemblage.
weird.
Yeah.
Do you think that? Are you saying that like when we first meet him, when we see him doing that, we don't really know the broader context? So then we're like, oh my gosh, he's done his life.
Yeah, and he just like his mind is not engaged in his marriage, and like by the end of the movie, you get the context that she's not engaged in this marriage; it's just a job.
Well,
Yeah.
it's also fair too because we see at the college flashback that he actually is interested in Sylvia before.
Yeah.
What's his wife's name?
Meryl.
Meryl, played by Laura Linney, who is
Yes.
just so perfectly cast as a woman on the brink. You know, she's an Ozark and she's always just trying to hold it together.
Yeah, I
On the
love
brink,
her.
but also the perfect like 50s. Not Nicaragua, no, blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so she comes into the picture when he's already staring at or admiring Lauren from afar.
Yeah.
Lauren slash Sylvia.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
think that his distractions there, I guess, being focused on another woman other than his wife, I think is completely. I think that. I guess you don't know right away that everything's constructed, but like later you find out that he was basically forced into this whole storyline. You know, like
Totally.
it feels kind of like an arranged marriage sort
Totally.
of thing.
And
where
it-
it's
it-
like
yeah.
I don't blame him for not being fully devoted to his wife when he probably was never fully devoted to his wife from the beginning, and he only married her because that was like the path that
Everybody-
was like so forced upon him.
Everybody in our universe already feels like that, where you can be 30 or 40 and be like, am I with the person I'm supposed to? Do I have the job I'm supposed to
Right,
have?
right.
Like, I'm supposed to follow this path that
Yeah.
society says you're supposed to follow, and here's all the reasons why it's a good choice for me to be on this path.
Right.
But for him, it's just like 10x, and he has. You can
Exactly.
bet that Marlon and his mother were like, that Meryl, she's a nice girl.
Yeah.
You probably can't do better than her.
No,
And so
exactly.
he just feels this to the extreme.
Well, and I imagine the pressure like people feel from parents and friends and whatever to like do certain things like that.
But if the whole world was pressure.
If there was literally no other alternative, because there's even like we don't know how hard he pushed back against this idea, but like from what we see of his tenacity later, we're like, oh, okay, well maybe he did push back a lot, and the showrunners just made it absolutely not possible
Or-
in any other outcome.
But no, it can't be that, because we know that Sylvia exists. We know that Lauren is cast in the show. They've put her in the show. They've placed her in the park within eyeshot of him. So it might be the case that there are several characters who are all in the running for his affections, and maybe the actor playing Meryl is just the most industrious and wants to be that top woman. She wants to be the
I don't
richest
think
actor
so.
on the planet.
No,
So
no.
she,
Activated trivia bot.
she falls on him.
Wait, David has
I have
trivia.
the answer. I have trivia.
That's not what happened.
She was supposed to be just an extra, and they didn't.
Who?
Sylvia. Sylvia was supposed to be just
Sylvia,
an extra.
okay,
they didn't.
not Meryl.
They didn't vet her properly, and the only reason Christoph let it go so long was he thought it might be interesting.
Right.
And he would later admit in later interviews that it was a huge mistake, and he should have stopped it right away.
Right.
Because that
That got
addresses
Fiji into his mind.
Yeah.
the main question I had with Sylvia was when they're in the library and Marlon's there and Meryl's there and they're studying and Marlon and Meryl are like, hey, let's go away and go have drinks. Are they trying to take him away because they know Sylvia's already sitting there and she's trouble? Because they try to convince Truman to leave, but he says, I really going to study, I'm going to stay. And that kind of is cool because it shows us the boundaries of the realism of the show, where it's like, they can try to force whatever they want, but he's a human with his own agency, and at some point, they couldn't be like, come with us right now,
Yeah.
because it would
And I
break
think-
the illusion.
Well, I think
don't know.
Christoph is invested in the illusion, and so he wouldn't want that. He doesn't want like security guards to come in and
Yeah.
drag him.
So,
he wants the authentic.
If he's going to be like, no guys, I'm staying, go away, at some point they have to, right?
I
So-
think that if they really wanted him to leave, what I think happened.
Well, yeah, the librarian could be like, guys, there's a smoke alarm. There's
Yeah,
carbon
yeah, yeah.
monoxide in the building. Leave now.
Or they could like have something that's like really enticing to him that he really wants more than studying or whatever. But I think that part of his character is this kind of like nerdy, like easygoing. You know, he cares about doing a good job or whatever. So then they would write it in a way where they will have the actors kind of be like, hey, come on, like kind of try to get him to go, but not try too hard. So that's because they know that he's going to be like, no, guys, I got to study.
Well, Christoph knows that the appeal of the show is his authentic
Right.
reaction. He's human. He's real. Christoph knows that, so he's going to write in. Yeah, try to take him away. It's better if we can take him away. But if he pushes back, that's the show.
I don't know if the appeal is as much his authentic reaction as it is that they have crafted this character who's fun to watch. I think we were having this conversation earlier about like how he's the true man, like it's authentic human reaction, but because everything is so heavily orchestrated, like okay, we get some real human reactions within scenes where it's like, okay, he goes to reunite with his dad or whatever, and then he hugs his dad. Christoph doesn't make him say dad, you know, in the hug, and that's the moment where it's like, oh, he said dad. Yeah, that's the good moment. He didn't make him say that. That was a real human moment. But beyond those like little tiny things, I think that's the only sphere in which he can have these sort of real reactions that you're talking about. But on a broad sense, making a decision to like study or not study, that's all orchestrated. That's not Truman making that decision to study and so he studies. That's the show allowing him to.
They are ultimately allowing him, but I'm saying it's give and take. Like, they tried to make him not,
No.
and then he put up his boundary,
I don't think
and
so.
then they didn't press harder. Okay, well, anyway, we're getting sidetracked because what I really want to talk about
I
is
want to talk a long time about that.
when they leave, Sylvia's there.
Yeah.
And the show is allowing her to be there.
No.
And they're allowing her. They would the librarian would have taken her away.
Right,
from her,
right, right.
So she's there, but we also know that she's not too purposefully there because when he starts to talk to her, and he's like, "Oh, Lauren," like she's like looks down at her book where her name is written.
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah, Lauren. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
Lauren." So she's not like she's an extra.
Yeah, and
She's
he's like Konnichiwa, and she's like, what?
like, "You're studying Japanese." Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like so she's not committed to the role.
I think in the backstory it says that she wasn't properly debriefed or properly trained, and so that Kristoff was like mad about that. But I could see in that moment, Kristoff, he's all about like he's the artist, he's the ultimate artist. I want the authentic, and he saw that that Truman showed interest in Sylvia, and so he might be like putting that out there to see what he gets, and he's not expecting her to go full truther on him and be like, it's all a lie, it's all a lie. He's expecting like maybe he'll fall in love and we can kind of craft the narrative around that.
I
and
guess
it'll
if
be
there's
more
any
authentic.
misstep, it's that once he identified the interest, he did not take her aside and brief her.
Yeah.
He should have
I
then.
think that's what I'm saying is that it seems to me more like she wasn't part of the plan explicitly. Like I think that the first shot where the first time we see her where they're in the park and they're making eye contact and then Meryl falls onto Truman. Then she's gone, assuming that like something happened. They shuffled her away. They're at the dance, and that
Same
exact
deal.
same thing happens. She gets shuffled away, and so both of those instances indicate to me that she was an extra, and they know that like she's kind of like trying to overstep her bounds. So then they're like, okay, first warning, second warning, and then. She was on the other side of his desk in the library, not because that was orchestrated by the show, but because she kind of wiggled her way in there and like found her way there. And
But they still know she's there, and they could take her away. So they've got to be allowing it.
I don't know. I think that I can imagine that there's a certain amount of wiggle room for like extras to kind of like be like, oh, I'm gonna sit at this desk instead of this desk.
But she's on their radar already. So I believe that
But maybe
they're
they
letting
don't think,
something happen.
Maybe they don't see how much of a big deal.
Yeah.
This must be a normal thing, right? For him to be like, oh, what's that? And
Pretty
then
girl,
they
yeah.
shuffle it over. They're not like, oh my gosh, we have to make sure we watch this person because he like looked at her.
She's clearly there as an activist. I believe that the
Oh,
pin
yeah.
she has that says "How does it end?"
Yeah.
I think that's an activist pin. I think it's from the world meta. Outside of the Truman Show, people in the world have these pins that say "How does it end?" Is they gonna kill him? Like, yeah, it's an
that's
activist
interesting.
pin. And then so anyway, she says we need to hang out like right now.
Yeah.
And they run off, and they run out so far that they're in parts of the world that aren't really filmable. They're in like the blocking is different, right? There's obstructions in front of the camera.
Yeah, yeah.
They're almost out of sight. And I think in the script that I read, she actually like takes her skirt off and gets in the water. She wades in the water and she's like, "Come skinny dip with me." And he's like, "I can't." And she's like, "Oh yeah, right. I'm so stupid. Obviously you can't." And he's like, "Huh?" Because like, how would you know that I don't like water?
Oh yeah.
And then the same thing happens where the dad shows up to pick her up. But in the script, the guy who comes to pick her up has red hair, and she says to Truman like, "He's going to lie to you. He's not my dad. Look at him. He looks nothing like me." They took that out. It's unneeded.
Yeah, it's not.
It's
She
a
just
great
needs to say that she's never seen him before.
But it's crazy how much she tells him everything. She even
Well,
goes so
that's-
far as to say it's a show. They're watching you. But then
he
he's
doesn't-
gaslighted.
But she doesn't like. I feel like she was trying so hard to like let him know. It's like true. It's nothing's real. Blah blah blah. But like, if she really wanted to tell him what was going on, she could have told him. It's exactly like this is a set. These are actors.
She
this
does.
Isn't real.
She says all that. She just doesn't say incoherent sentences like, "Look, dude, you are inside a dome.
Yeah.
You are the star of a TV
That's
show.
what I'm-
It's
that's
not
what-
succinct. It's
But
really,
I think it would be hard though. Like if you were on a date with someone that's like the most famous person in the whole world, and you're like, I don't really want to like weird them out. I gotta wait for the right moment, and then all of a sudden it's like you don't have a moment. This is it or nothing.
I guess
well, there's
maybe-
another part to her character, which is I think she loves Truman because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people in the world they grow up and they feel like they know him, and Truman takes the words from her because he kisses her.
Yeah.
She tries to tell him something like, "I can't talk," and she's like, "Then don't," and then they kiss,
Right.
and it's when the car is already there to interrupt her that she starts trying to tell him that it's all a charade, so she really doesn't have time.
I mean, maybe you're right that like she doesn't like. It would not be possible to express the fullness of the situation to him in that moment. But like, it was just so funny to me that like everything that she was saying could be easily dismissed as the ramblings of like a conspiracy theorist or like someone who's
Or a schizophrenic person,
Yeah.
as her father
Well, that's
said.
why it works, I think, in the movie, because you don't want it to be so clear to Truman that he should immediately go on the run.
Yeah, he has to kind of remember that and keep that with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
What do
movie.
what do you guys think happened after he got out of the dome? because Sylvia puts on her jacket and runs out the door. Like she's like, I'm
I
gonna go
love
meet
that
him.
the credits just roll when he steps out.
Oh,
yeah.
Because
perfect.
everything that follows, you can imagine.
You can imagine.
I saw on the internet
Do you think
some people hate the ending. They're like, I want to know what happens. I'm like, no, that's
No,
not
no,
a good
no.
ending.
You know what happens.
Yeah.
He goes out. There's studio people who like give him space as he walks out. Then there's a bunch of paparazzi at the door. They're all in his face. Then Sylvia's there. They hug.
Yeah.
They push the paparazzi away. They get in the car, and then he gets reintroduced to life.
Yeah.
It's a great example of restraint
Yeah.
used in filmmaking because everyone wants to find out what happens next.
Yeah.
But the difference between a good ending and a bad ending is when you stop.
They're ending on the high.
Yeah.
You're right up here.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have the denouement of them hugging and being like, Truman, Sylvia.
And then he gets out and finds out that his only skills are insurance. So then he just becomes a real insurance broker.
You'd never have to work.
Or you get the Zack Snyder
Bro.
cut of the movie. Truman's head explodes. Sylvia falls down the stairs. Christoph's like, we'll have another one, and then it turns like the turnstile happens, and there's
Oh my
clones
God.
of Truman.
Oh God.
Oh, speaking of Christoph, I did want to ask you guys about whether, like, he's sad when it ends. Christoph?
Yeah, in the original script, there's like a whole the movie actually ends on Christoph, and it's like everyone's kind of like cheering but kind of weirded out in the upper studio, and he just sits in the chair and
In
he
the
like
moon room.
yeah, in the moon moon room, and he's like, oh.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie kind of
But that's
ends.
so funny to me because it's like they paint him as this like artistic what am I looking for? Savant. Like he's like amazing. He's got the vision. Yeah. And I would think that as a artist, maybe he understands that this is the best ending. Like the best ending isn't the one in which Truman remains a captive his entire life and just kind of like lives
Well,
and dies in the dome.
True, but again, he has these other interests like money and other scope of the show that he wants to do.
Right.
He really, they have the deleted scene, but he does mention he wants to have a baby born on camera. So
Right.
he has these other milestones he has to hit
That's
yet.
true. That's true.
And I think it might be a big picture thing that like 10 years later he would be like, yes, that was the perfect ending. I couldn't have orchestrated it better.
Yeah.
But as it's happening, it's like everything's falling apart. It's all over. This is
Yeah.
so terrifying.
Yeah, okay. I track with that a little bit.
I have a question for you guys. Is this a matrix you would want to plug into if you could have your mind erased and go live as Truman?
No way.
What?
No way, dude.
The town's so boring.
Nasty. Lame. Like
Also, the town is too small for the things it has. Like
Yeah.
they make reference to like Sea Haven Tonight, like a Tonight Show
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Dude, the Sea Haven looks like
Yeah.
it's like 4,000 people.
Oh, if even.
they have like a college. And
They have like a
everything.
high-rise building with business executives and stuff. It's like,
Right,
what?
right.
It's a tiny town.
It's just like a little microcosm of an American city. Yeah, Christoph says Sea Haven is America as it should be.
Yeah.
It's like,
I think it's an interesting kind of mild exploration of that theme where it's like the kind of 50s America is like I feel like America, and
Yeah.
people are like, yeah, it's what we want to go back to. Like, I
Nobody's
think that's what
looking
Make
at
America
me.
Great is about. It's like we want to go back to 50s America where
Yeah.
everyone's prosperous. There's no crime. There's no this.
And like, just look at the road outside of his house. It's not even concrete. It's like it's a cobblestone.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Man.
Right,
It looks
right.
like a pedestrian downtown,
But it's not
like a
real.
car-free area.
But it's not real, and it never
see,
can
this
be
is
real.
so funny because like I feel like from the get go, Sea Haven isn't like I wasn't like, ooh, that sounds like a great. it looked just boring as hell. Like I don't know. It just
I think though, like, I mean, yes, it's not a real town, so if you're not Truman, I'm sure it's garbage. But I think they probably
Sure.
made sure that he had enough activities to do
yeah.
that it would be interesting.
It fits in the budget. They obviously can't have like an urban, a lively, like a Chinatown, and there's like really good noodles over there, and like it's small, right?
Well, the original script was set in New York. It was like a parallel universe New York, and it was like
Yeah, that'd
they
be
would
too
have had
hard.
more of that, but that's
There's
too
too
hard.
many variables.
Yeah.
Oh, there's actually a line from the script I read that wasn't in this movie, and it's because when Sylvia's dad takes her away, rushes her off, and he says, Fiji, we're moving to Fiji. And he just ad-libs that
Yeah,
because they're
yeah.
just reactive.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then it cuts to the creator. What's the creator's name? Christoph. Cuts to Christoph being like, oh, and this is actually in the explanation of what happened, like in the montage part. Christoph's like, good thing he didn't say New York. Like he said something far away that's like, thank God.
Yeah, that if they ever had to recreate Fiji.
And there's actually, they did recreate, in the script, they do recreate Fiji. In the part where he's running away and he's intercepted by like the nuclear plant thing.
Yeah.
In the screenplay, you can hear the noise of construction, and then it cuts to behind this like artificial wall of foliage that they had intercepted him in front of. Behind that, there's a new set being created, and there's all these Polynesian people with like learning how to present lei necklaces, and there's a artificial volcano going off, and they've constructed a plane and like a gate and a runway and stuff. Like they were going to react to how to handle
You know,
his
that,
desire.
now that I think about
love
it, it'd be
that.
pretty easy for them to like simulate the whole getting in a plane, taking off, flying somewhere else.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Oh, I
It'd be
just
like a Disney ride.
I think it's just a reality of filmmaking that creating those props for the one shot of Fiji is too tough.
that's exactly
Yeah.
it. And
You
one
wanna go
more
on a hike or
removed,
something.
one more removed line that I thought was really drove it home for me, but Danver made it in the movie, was when they're talking about Sylvia, the line, you know how they go to those like waitresses, and they're talking about like, oh, those two never had a chance, and they talk about like relationship
I love
aspect.
those characters.
There was a line that was like, Sylvia was willing to give up everything so that Truman could find himself.
Oh.
And I thought, that's awesome, and that's why he likes her so much, really. But down at the root of it, yes, she's like beautiful, and she represents more chaos and
Yeah.
going with
And
your
answers,
and instinct and
She might
intuition.
actually be insane.
But she also was the only one.
knows?
She was the only one in the world who was like willing to lose everything so that he could be the best version, a realist version of himself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think he kind of can sense that.
Totally. Well, yeah, for sure. She represents freedom and answers, and he's lived the whole life contained, and she's freedom.
Absolutely.
I wonder what a cardigan smells like.
I wish. I want to see the Zack Snyder cut of this movie where like she's like in front of the TV and it pans around and there's like a hair doll of Truman and she's just like
Oh
goes
my
and like
God.
pets it.
Yes, yeah.
This is more like a Eli Roth version.
And the whole
Yeah.
movie's been in her mind.
Yeah. There is no Truman.
There
She's the
is no
Truman.
Truman Show.
But there is no
She
other
just
TV.
imagined it.
She's in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Oh
And
my
there is
God.
a Truman Show in the Matrix.
Okay. Wait, do you have any more important?
I have a broad question, but
Okay.
it's not about really the movie.
Go for it.
Okay.
Why does ADR suck so bad?
Well, it's just the 90s. I've been struggling with this quite a bit. That people in our generation, I think, are okay with losing privacy, and it's not like
Oh, this is real.
something that we are talking about. Like I was talking with a dude on the weekend, and he's like, police should be able to bust into any house they want if they have any suspicion of child porn or like child trafficking.
Right.
And I'm like, yes and no, and like yes, if they have suspicions, they have warrants, fuck it, go get them.
Yeah.
Go get them right now. But like, no, police shouldn't have like a unilateral right to just go anywhere they want.
People
But,
with that opinion have just grown up in such a safe world, and they just don't
Right.
remember the sins of their ancestors. We're like, no, we've been through this, and we know that what happens is the scope creeps, where who decides what warrants you being able to run into someone's house without having like jurisprudence. Like, oh, this crime, I have free reign, carte blanche to just bust into your house. Well, now this crime, and now this crime. The same logic applies to like hate speech laws and stuff like that.
Do you think there's like a parallel to how we're trading privacy for fame? That we're using our privacy as a currency for social media notoriety. And do you think I find this movie is very prophetic in that sense that like people will be like reality TV stars and social media stars and like
their life will be on display for everyone to see, and that's the appeal of it. But do you think that there's like what do you think that means?
The Truman
It's
Show
really-
is an allegory for social media before social
Kind
media
of.
even
Like,
existed.
Well,
It's
it does.
crazy.
It does speak to the other side of that coin instead of the supply side, the demand side. Why is it that we are so fascinated with the mundane inner workings of someone's private life? Why is it that I want to see this guy brushing his teeth?
Yeah.
Why do I want to see a vlog of someone just like picking up the dog shit?
Yeah, making a
But
smoothie.
I want to. Why?
Well, see, that's an interesting thing about this movie is that I feel like watching some of the people watching Truman, I was like, you would get bored at some point. Like
Yeah.
you'd tune back out and tune back in. I guess you'd like tune in and be like, oh, what's Truman up to now?
Well, like on the early days when he was just a baby, they would have like the sleeping cam, and you could actually buy a sideways TV crib, so that you would be able to, instead of like looking at Truman sleeping, you'd be able to like look into this crib with a screen and see him sleeping.
That's messed up.
And
I was wondering about those early days. It would have been such a less engaging show, so it must have just been back then. It was only on like at prime time for an hour or
no,
something.
it was nonstop, but it was a much cheaper show to produce, and it was a lot less popular.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it became popular with his first steps, but it was originally it was just the ultrasound of the belly, and then it was one room, and then they had to build a kitchen, and then they had to build a house, and then that's when they had to go find investors to build this dome. And they had planned to meet like hundreds of people to get chunks of investments, but the first person they met gave them all the money they needed.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, we're so on board with this.
Wow. See,
Where is this document? This is so cool.
It's in the script. It's like there's two parts of the intro by the director, and then there's like 24 pages by the scriptwriter in the middle. And
Because
it's
David actually has a physical published copy of this script
Yeah, I
with
love
like
it so much.
with cover art and
You
everything.
do?
Yeah.
It's bound. He just forgot it at home today.
yeah, I was
What
gonna
the
show it.
heck?
I love this movie. I got it for like $3 on the internet. I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah, okay, sure. I think I dropped it in a tub though, because it was all like warped from
Oh,
the water. I
geez.
was sad.
See, the parallel to social media that I think we were just talking about. I think that I think the thing that's so attractive to social media isn't necessarily the fact that like we're getting a glimpse into someone else's life. It's the fact that we're getting a glimpse into literally everyone's life. When you scroll through Instagram, you are getting like quick, intimate glimpses of so many different people, and it's just so easy to keep scrolling, right?
Yeah.
It's like and I think the danger there, obviously, the danger in the Truman Show is that he doesn't have any freedom, right? Everything's constructed. Everyone's getting a glimpse into his life, but that's a fake life. And that's the thing that's horrific about that is the fact that he's not living a real life. But I think the thing that's horrific about social media is that we have cheapened life to the point where someone taking a photo of a family gathering or like a trip or some real event that's going on in their life, they take a photo of that and that means a lot to them. But we see it and scroll past it on Instagram. We're like, oh, pretty cool. Keep scrolling.
Yeah, there's the
It's
social media
completely-
arms race
Yeah.
where it's like everything is hyper real. I'm not sharing with you my real life. I'm showing you my curated projection
Yes.
of my life. Look at my nice apartment when it's spick and
Right.
span.
There's that
Look at
element
me.
too, where influencers spend hours and hours and hours setting up the perfect shot. I think I read an article one time about some influencer who like went on a trip to maybe it was Fiji, and they're like staying in a nice hotel and stuff, and they said they posted a photo and they were like, it took me like 3 hours to set up this shot, and it's just them like standing in front of a window looking out or whatever. But like, you know, everything's perfectly placed. Like there's things in the corner, product placement on a shelf there. And it took them 3 hours to make the shot, and to someone else it just looks like, oh, look, I'm having this really cool time on vacation. Really, they're like spending hours and hours and hours
Yeah,
making
and the
things look perfect.
horrific thing about that is how it ups the standard.
Yeah.
So now it's so weird to me that like how even children now know how to pose for photos, and like every 10-year-old girl you see, it's like, oh, she's gonna stand with her chest kind of off angle to the camera. She's gonna turn her arm and hide it behind her so she looks skinnier. She's probably gonna arch her back and bend her knees a little bit. It's like, why does an 8-year-old know how to do
I
that?
know.
It's disgusting. That.
Oh man, we're
Instagram-
having a boomer moment
Yeah,
here now.
dude,
though.
It's bad.
My big question is, do we do it because it makes us feel inspired by them, or does it make us feel better about ourselves? Or because like reality shows, we're seeing the worst of
We're trying to keep
humanity.
up with the Joneses, right? And you want to be the Joneses. So you're trying to take a picture that you think represents you in the best way.
Yep.
But then everyone else is like, damn, now I need to do that and be as good and get the clout and get the reaction from other people that I'm living my life properly.
Absolutely. You see these people having so much fun. They're having so much fun in their lives, and you want to be part of that. You don't want to be missing out.
Well, they nailed that in the Truman Show, where it's like people just want to be part of Truman's life.
Yeah, the guy's like helicopter, or not helicopter.
Parachuting.
Parachuting into the.
The guy comes out of the gift and he's like, I'm on the Truman Show. I'm on the Truman Show. That was so perfect. That's
So
exactly
funny.
how it would be.
Yeah. Highly recommend this movie. Watch it again with all the trivia that I've given you.
Yeah.
The little tidbits of.
So there's a couple things that I want to bring up because it's like they were like nitpicks. We got to do nitpicks.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've praised this movie enough. When they're trying to find him when he falls asleep in the basement or whatever, and they can't track him on the camera.
Oh, they do an enhance.
They do an enhance.
Enhance.
He's like, wait, quick, over there, zoom in, enhance it. I wrote down, enhance it.
The crazy thing is that we're there. Like, we have AI upscaling, we have AI cleaning, so where you can take like a really shitty image and actually get the detail back. So
Yeah,
like,
that's funny.
we're
eh?
there,
'Cause
and
I
like
think
that's
that
a
it was,
real
like,
thing.
That was so like futuristic, and everyone's like, you can't just enhance.
Yeah.
But it's like now with AI, it's like you almost
Your
can.
NVIDIA Shield can.
All
like-
these things are. You're.
Hit me up with your next nitpick.
Oh, where is it? Oh, actors. They're like, well, are they gonna hire actors to be a bus driver who can't drive a bus? Like, I feel like that's a requirement. Even when you hire somebody to drive a bus in a movie,
Well, okay,
you make
the
sure they can
driver-
drive a bus.
Okay, that actor, he couldn't drive the boat. He said, I can't drive. The bottom line is they can't drive the boat. They're actors.
You think that
but
he
when
purposefully-
he's on the bus and he's grinding the gears and it causes that bus breakdown,
Yeah.
in the movie that played to me like, oh, he knows how to drive the bus. He's intentionally grinding the gears so
Yeah.
that they can't leave.
Same.
However, in the screenplay, it actually is out of ineptitude.
Oh.
Yeah, no, honestly, because I thought that too when I watched the movie. I was like, oh, maybe he's doing that.
It reads better the
But
movie
I
for me.
What?
It plays better the way they did the movie.
Where it's ineptitude.
No, where it's like, oh, he's causing this thing. Another thing that I thought was great in the movie is when that light drops down, and this is again is better in the movie than the screenplay that I read. When the light drops down at the beginning, he's like looking at it, he's like, that's weird. He gets into his car, and then the radio announcer on the car talks about how this is an event, like a plane went over and it dropped from it, and then he spins it, so he's like, huh, you guys want to fly right now? I bet not. That's crazy. Who wants to be
Yeah.
in a plane that's like dropping parts? And they use that random event that
Yeah.
could actually trigger his curiosity about the world and his skepticism about the world. They use it to double down on why he should not leave
Right.
and not escape the world, and that was so clever and insidious.
That doesn't make sense. Wait, but the bus driver thing, real quick. I think that it makes sense that he was actually inept because later they double up on the joke. They're like, okay, we got to get boats. The only way to go get him is to go out on boats. Like, oh no, they don't know how to drive the boats. They're just actors. And I think that indicates that he's.
You're right, Ashley, because he again is at a set of levers going.
Yeah,
"Blah,
it's
blah."
the same thing.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, I'm like, there's somebody there who knows how to drive a boat.
I don't know, man.
Like, actors aren't just like clones that come off a
but
production line.
they're
with-
not planning to have the boat move that day. And
I was offended as an actor.
can you drive a ferry?
I can drive a regular boat.
Probably a bit more
Look, there's
complicated.
levers. You just push it forward.
I don't know, man.
Release the
I
e-brake.
can't even tie the knots.
Okay, give us a second. We're gonna go rent a boat. Riley's gonna try driving it.
Give me your
Rent a
next
ferry.
nitpick.
I don't know if I have any more. I thought you guys would have
The
any.
movie's perfect. I already did mine. Where I wish more people loved Truman. On the inside,
Oh, the actors double as organizers. When they're like, oh, we need to find him, and then they're like, the Marlon and even the twins, the old twin guys, they're like organizing people and ordering them around and stuff.
And the neighbor's dog is evil. The Dalmatian
And the
snarling.
guy's like, get him, Pluto. I'm like, wait, so you actually, this is your real dog? Like,
He's a trained dog.
yeah, it was so that broke the illusion. A
I
little
think
bit.
though it'd be
I liked it.
it'd be a wasted amount of time to have to set up like manager characters, and
Oh, I
it's
don't-
a lot easier to just have the actors be the person, and then they have hundreds of extras on the show. That's the easiest like large group of people to just search.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, we saw that a bit in the deleted scene where the main actors are kind of like part of the
That's just like Hollywood,
creative
dude.
group.
That's exactly what happens in Hollywood. You get a movie, you got a screenplay going, and you're like, oh, we're gonna get George Clooney or Brad Pitt on board on this movie. And then it's like, well, that person has so much power that they become kind of like a producer, and they can
That's
start calling the shots.
I
and they
guess so.
They
I
can,
could see
they
Tom
have more
Cruise.
power than the screenwriter a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I guess if we're saying that the actors who are in Truman's close circle are sort of at the same level as like a George Clooney or Tom Cruise,
They're way up
that
there.
kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
So next week, Mulan.
Are we doing it?
Yeah, I guess
wanted
so.
to do
We're
it.
gonna try.
And we'll make a man out of you. That should have been the end line. I shouldn't have.
Let's get down to business.
To defeat
The bad review.
the.
I
I'm done.